Is this recording?
We are recording.
Awesome. Here we are on The Blind Man in Black. I am your host, Brian Snyder. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate, subscribe, and like, and do anything. It helps. If you don't like it, send it to people you don't like. Appreciate it. So here we are. I'm super excited because I'm here with filmmaker, screenwriter, storyteller, entrepreneur, and world traveler, Athena Gam. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's been what, like 20 something years. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been, yeah, I guess it would be 20 years, right? Yeah,
Yeah, over that. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. 20 years exactly.
Yep, yeah.
I didn't even think of that. I
I
was trying to
know.
think when I met you because I was trying to think because well, we'll talk about it later. But anyway, how you been holding up through COVID and the pandemic and all that stuff?
Well, I mean, it's been a year. uh, yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, I've had not just the whole COVID thing go down, but just a lot of really intense experiences happening. It seems like they're all kind of like loading up, and so yeah, it's been a year, that's for sure.
Yeah. That's just to say the least. So I want to explore your life. I want to find out because I don't know a lot about you because um and it's funny because I don't think I was even in the show. You were a stage manager. That was your track at CalArts when we were there together. And I don't even think we were ever involved in a play together, right?
Were you in the Scottish play?
No.
Okay, then no, I think that would have been the one because that was the biggest cast, I think. So
No, I
no,
was
yeah, we
not.
may not have been, yeah, we may not have ended up in the same productions.
Yeah, because I worked with who did I work with? I worked with Pam a little bit. I worked with Rebecca
Hmm.
and uh I'm blanking. Who else?
Maybe Dana.
Yeah, Dana several times. I
Hmm.
loved her. She is so funny. And yeah, so but I don't think we had an opportunity to work together, sadly.
Yeah, that's crazy. I can't even, yeah, it's,
I don't know why. Did
it happens.
you didn't work on Richard Foreman project, did you?
No, that was, no, Pam did. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so yeah, so we met at CalArts and I did not learn much about you, but you were always there and we always cross, I can't even say that, cross paths. That sound right?
Yeah, you've got your diction, your acting diction happening.
Is it
Cross
happening?
path.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's been a while since I've used it. So, but yeah, so tell us about the genesis of Athena.
Genesis. Well, I mean, where do you want me to start? Like
Well,
CalArts,
I want you to start
pre-CalArts?
in a place that like your earliest memories that like formed who you are. Like what were your influences? Who were your influences? And what are some of the formative moments that made you who you are today?
Okay. Well, I grew up in Southern California, in Laguna Hills,
Okay.
and so I grew up in a pretty, pretty privileged, um, primarily white area, and but my
How did you
dad,
feel about that?
so I mean, this is like a whole kind of piece of introspection that I've been going into over the past few years because I'm Chicana. I'm
Hmm.
Latina. I've now, identified as Chicana, which because of my kind of different involvements and connections and, with different social movements. And so, but I also come, from a mixed race background. So, my mom is, her whole family is from Texas, New Mexico area. So I grew up around that, culture and that family, going back and forth from, California to El Paso, which is where my grandparents were living.
Hmm.
And, but then my dad, he is a New York Jew. So he's Ashkenazi Jewish.
Okay.
He grew up. He has actually a really interesting story because his mom was really involved in Hollywood, from him as a young age, and he was much actually like you, Brian. My dad was much older.
Hmm.
So he was in his 40s when he had late 40s when he had me.
Okay.
Actually, one of my earliest memories is my dad's 50th birthday party.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah.
Was he
So,
was he present?
so my dad was in Vietnam
Ah.
and he was a military guy. He was a major in the Air Force.
Hmm.
And so PTSD definitely affected him. And also, being from an earlier generation, I was listening to you talk about your dad in one of your podcasts.
Hmm.
There was a bit of a there was a bit of a, I don't know if it's just the way, generationally dads were to kids, but he was a little distant, but he's also a really loving man. And I like to say that my dad was kind of like a Jewish mom in
Okay.
a way, because he was raised by a single Jewish mom, in the
Hmm.
40s and 50s. So and she was involved in Hollywood and actually was a costume designer that worked under Edith Head. So
Okay.
yeah, so
So
he
it's in your DNA.
yeah, I mean, it's funny because my generation, so my brother and I were the first to go into the arts, but we have like a lot of like musical talent in our family, a lot of kind of theatrical sort of different connections to theatrical type stuff, and then of course Rita Gam is a distant cousin who was an actress that was of that time. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, so going into theater, I went into theater at age 9, working in community theater.
As
And
an actor?
yeah, as an actor.
Okay.
So I was part of the Laguna Playhouse in Laguna Beach is a well-known, actually, I think they did become an equity theater later on
Hmm.
after my time. But they had a really excellent youth theater program, and I went and saw a play when I was a kid, and got really excited and just turned to my parents, was like, I want to do that, So I started doing acting classes, and then finally got cast in. The first role I got cast in was a play that was about the Holocaust, and so I was a child that ended up going to the youth child camp that was a part of Auschwitz in the play.
Hmm.
So yeah, so for me, theater and kind of an um, understanding of the world kind of were always hand in hand and started early on, like from that young age. And then from there, that's how I got into stage managing, which is what I went to CalArts for, and production managing, stage managing. So
So I mean, that play, did it impact you, or because of your roots, or I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So I didn't none of my immediate family were Holocaust survivors.
Hmm.
On my dad's side, my grandfather's family, they actually escaped the pogroms in the Ukraine. So they came to New York. I think it was actually pre-Ellis Island. Was some of the family had come, and then around the time of the pogroms, they were getting away.
Hmm.
And then on my maternal grandma's side, they were in Austria, so they were Jewish in Austria, and they got out in the early, again, I guess it was the early turn of the century, and so my grandmother was the first born in New York, and so she was always a New Yorker, a New York Jew, and was a flapper. Like she was a real, she was pretty wild and very much like,
Speakeasies.
yeah, and she was also a businesswoman. She owned her own costume shop in Greenwich Village,
Hmm.
and so in the 30s and 40s, being a woman, single woman business owner, she didn't actually have my dad until she was about 40.
Oh, okay.
So she had a whole kind of life in New York beforehand. So I think I, got a lot of my interest in theater, from that, potentially from that side of the family. So
Did you meet her?
yeah, she passed away when I was 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
So
have some memories?
yeah, I have actually really yeah, pretty impactful memories, which is amazing because I was, yeah, 2 years old, because she was a singer. She would sing, and she was really involved in like the Jewish community. And so I remember, going to different places around LA area and seeing her perform. Like she performed at Knott's Berry Farm one time, and I remember her singing, and yeah, just being really like a vibrant, vivacious person. So yeah, that's definitely, yeah, a big impact on my formative years was my grandmother. So
So where did you make the choice? You're like, you were doing acting, right? And
yeah.
then what made you go into stage management?
Uh, well, I had a pretty rough family life. So the one part that was always kind of difficult for me, was kind of, things like homework, things like memorizing lines. I was really kind of dealing with a lot of turmoil at home, between my parents. And so I didn't, it wasn't easy for me to like sit down, have the commitment at, as a kid to be learning my lines, to be, whatever. And so, and then there was the other factor, which is, it's the 80s, right? So,
Hmm.
I had been really excited about acting. I had wanted to, like, maybe even start doing commercials, or, like as a kid. And one of the first directors that I worked with, I remember very clearly, they did this acting for screen class for kids, and they prepare you like, oh, what do you need to wear for an audition? And at that time it was, oh, little pink sweaters and hairs and ponytails and things like that. And she's like, well, I don't even think you should try because you're too ethnic looking, is what she said to me. And
Wow.
so, yeah, that kind
How
of
did
hit
you
me.
feel about that?
I wish that I had had a stink at the time, but I honestly didn't. I think I just kind of was like, oh, I'm too ethnic looking. And that was, and she was actually Jewish too. So, I mean,
Mm.
that was her, or I don't know if she was speaking to my Jewish or Hispanic look, but I'm assuming it's, looking Jewish.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so that had kind of hit me where it was sort of, and I was never getting cast in the, we did little musicals and things, and I was never getting cast in the bigger roles. So, again, I don't know whether that was because I thought it was great and I wasn't, or whether it was, because I just didn't have the look.
Hmm.
So, but I did get a lot of attention. uh, I think it was around age 13 that they were, having the kids would help to produce, they'd have adult directors, but then the kids would be helping learning things backstage, and, even being like light board operators, soundboard operators, and then stage managers they started bringing in like when you're in your young teens. And so I actually started stage managing when I was 13, and I really got excited about being behind the scenes, and I really got
Hmm.
excited about seeing the production from beginning to end, bigger picture.
And calling
And
the show.
yeah, and calling the show is super fun.
Yeah.
And you kind of have this, you know, godlike view of, you're up
Yeah.
there in the booth. At least in California, we call from, the back of the theater as opposed to backstage, and then
Right.
looking down over everything, and kind of thing. So that kind of moved me towards getting interested in stage management, which also eventually kind of led towards me recognizing why I was excited about the creative side, of production and theater, and getting back to kind of being able to be creative as opposed to, just holding down the production technical aspects and stuff. So
Okay.
yeah,
So how was your time at CalArts?
it was. I mean, it was pretty tumultuous, I would say. I think that, for one, you're young, and you're going to, a ridiculously expensive arts school. And part of what you're learning when you're in, at that college level is just how to function as an adult. Um, I had a pretty dark kind of teenage years were really rough. And so going into CalArts, I'd kind of sort of brought a little bit of, kind of this, I was very much always kind of have been like a system buster type person, and kind of identified with counterculture
Hmm.
a little bit. And so being at CalArts, I feel like I was always kind of, even though I think that I was pretty good and compliant in terms of like doing my work and, because it was my passion that I was moving towards, I always felt like I was in some kind of conflict with, you know, the way things were being done, the whatever faculty and decisions they were making. I just remember everything always being so high drama. And I also remember it being very high drama in terms of how the students were being treated. I
Okay.
think, yeah, I think we had a lot of awareness that as students, how we were kind of, especially as a stage manager, you're in a role of of learning to protect the actors,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
ultimately you're learning to like uphold kind of union rules, when you become professional. And so, kind of my perspective was always a little bit of like the safety of the actors, and actors were, yeah, always getting kind of injured or like pushed to the sort of limits. And it's like, actually these are students. Like this is, these aren't necessarily adults that are out in the world getting paid a paycheck and, risks that are taking. I mean, it's really, I really had a lot of, yeah, I always remember there, I don't remember the details, but I always remember there being some sort of like, this actor getting treated badly, or this director, flipping out and throwing a table and having a tantrum and, things like that. And looking back on it now, I'm like, wow, the maturity level of, people that were directors and staff, like, I'd always grown up with directors that were extremely abusive, actually. you
Oh,
know,
really?
screaming and yelling, and the way they get what they want is by, throwing big fits.
Right.
you know, and I'm recognizing, it took me a while. I recognized it then, but it's like there's really actually no place for that in the creative process. Like, I mean, it's ridiculous. People are. Actors especially are like putting their hearts out there, putting themselves out there, going into really deep process. I mean, they need to be treated with respect. So I think that I was kind of always holding that line. I mean, not to say that CalArts was a, only horrible, but, like I said, when you're kind of identify with counterculture and you're at that age, it's like you're always in a fight against the man. So
Right. Did you ever work with Craig Belknap?
I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed him, and he was a dear friend and mentor. And one of the reasons I loved him is he made me feel so comfortable and at ease, and made it fun, the process. And I appreciated that. And but I know what you're talking about. By the way, did Dana tell you that I fell from the balcony in where the audience was for Edward II?
I seem to remember that because we were always sort of sharing our stories of different experiences. Like,
Right.
so I mean, the stage managers, like, we were a pretty tight knit group of, kind of, and this is what happened, and kind of checking in with each other. So I do kind of, I remember, like, I vaguely remember these different injuries that were happening and
Yeah,
how things
I didn't get
shifted.
hurt, but I should have. I mean, I fell from, do you remember Edward II? It was like in the round, the
Was
audience was above looking down at the stage.
in the modular theater in the mod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were breaking down the set, and where they were kind of like little boxes for the audience.
Okay. Yeah.
And I like stepped backwards, and I just was like, oh no. And I just remember I was like, this is probably how I'm gonna die. Like, I just remember thinking, this is it. Because my grandfather died because he fell off an oil rig.
Oh.
So I thought, oh wow, the legacy continues
Oh
of
no.
odd deaths. And so I fell, and I just remember as I was falling, I was like, this is it. This is the end of my life. And I just landed, like, I think because I was relaxed and kind of gave into it.
Yeah.
Like, I just kind of fell, and I immediately went down, and then I hopped back up, and everybody's looking at me going, and I was like, I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm fine. I'm fine. So, but yeah,
Scary.
it was,
Yeah.
but yeah. So, the other thing about CalArts that I remember about you is you had a boyfriend at the time, whom is now your husband, right?
Yeah. Eric Lake.
And and you've been together for how many years?
Oh, a million.
A million years. So it's like an eternal thing. So it's like it's that deep. It's like this eternal flame that's been burning for thousands of years.
I mean, I wouldn't say that. Like the way that my perspective is that we have work to do together in this lifetime.
Okay.
Really. We grew up on the same street, or well, so I moved to the neighborhood, I think when I was, I don't know, 8 or 9.
Hmm.
So we grew up in the same neighborhood and actually didn't meet until high school because I had gone to private schools and was homeschooled. And so we met in high school, public high school, and we were always doing art together. Like from the beginning,
Hmm.
before we even dated, we were like writing poems and working on little film, working on little films, and then we dated, and then, whatever high school drama. And then we ended up, I mean, drama in high school, not being a part of
Right.
drama
Not being a
class.
part of the drama of high school life. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then yeah, I think we started dating again our senior year, and then we both got into CalArts. So yeah.
And that, do you think had you went to different colleges, like if for whatever reason one of you didn't get into CalArts or whatever, do you think you would have stayed together?
I mean, that's really hard to say, but I'm guessing probably not.
Okay, that's interesting.
I would say because I mean it's hard to say. I mean things were a little different then in terms of communication too. It wasn't like, oh, I'm on Facebook and we're texting all the time, kind of thing. Like I didn't, we didn't have that kind of ease of communication. If you wanted to talk to somebody, you had to pick up the phone, you had to leave a message, you had to have
Send an
conversation,
email through
send an
AOL or
email.
Hotmail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like, I mean, because of the fact that we always had art that we were collaborating on, like always had projects that we were working on together, like we both um like utilize the other person to help us with our little interests and such.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I mean, I think that it was just, we grew up together. It's such an interesting relationship. Like we grew up together, we became artists together, we developed, interests together, and we were both system busters. I mean, I think we still are. We've always been a little bit on the um I don't know. I think artists are maybe a little bit more aware of what's happening in the world and kind of like maybe one step ahead of what pop culture, kind of.
What was that term you used? You've used it. I heard it twice now, but I'm not catching it.
Which one?
You said you're both.
We're both, well, I mean, as artists, I was saying that we're both a little ahead of the I guess the status quo, and I'll catch it. I'm sure I'll say it again, whatever the
Okay,
word
you said
was.
it twice. You said it once earlier, and then I didn't catch it, and then I thought, okay,
System busters, maybe?
yeah. Well,
I'll say
what's
that.
System Busters? System Busters. Okay. All right. Yeah, now I
Yeah.
heard it. For whatever it sounded totally different. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, it's my hearing. But anyway, so I mean, I want to ask you, I don't know if we should wait till the end, but I really want to know what is the glue that keeps you together? It sounds like what I'm hearing is that you grew together
Yeah.
as opposed to grew apart, as cliche as that is.
Yeah, I mean we're also like we're family. I mean, obviously we're married, so we've become family, but there's a sense of um I guess we have similar ways of looking at the world. Um we have similar ways of deconstructing the world, I guess. Um Critiquing, maybe. That goes back to the art school thing.
But wait a minute, though. You said you had some trauma, right? A little bit
Yeah.
in the early days, and like, I mean, like, how do you? I mean, I've been through some difficult times, and sometimes, because of that, I grew up with a lot of anger, and communication anger was externalized verbally. It
Right.
was definitely not
Yeah.
nonviolent communication. And so like how like even early on, like how was the communication? Like, I mean, I mean, was it all? I mean, I'm assuming you probably have had arguments, right?
Well, so we're both Latino, so we're
Okay.
both fiery. I mean, we solve problems externally for sure.
Hmm.
And I think I actually I've mellowed over the years. I mean, it's been a lot of work, but I think, I mean, I don't know at what point we started doing like that inner work that you start to do as an adult, where you become self-reflective. You start to look at, who am I and how am I relating to the world. um, I would say that there's times where, in terms of, I guess, maturity, emotional maturity, that he's been a little bit ahead of me, and there's been times that I've been a little bit ahead of him. So we've always pushed each other forward. We've always, um, I don't know, been each other's, um, I wouldn't say guiding light, but there's whatever we fight about, it's like an area of growth that needs to be addressed, right? And
Right.
so I think, but I will say that the thing that kept us together was, okay, so I mean, I came from a pretty, yeah, a lot of domestic violence in the home, a lot of, fear. Um, I'm pretty sure now I'm coming to an understanding after years of therapy that my mom is probably undiagnosed borderline personality disorder,
Okay.
if not bipolar disorder, and bipolar runs in my family.
Is there a little
So,
bit of narcissism there?
well, I think borderline personality disorder is like hand in hand with
Right.
narcissism.
Yeah, there are narcissistic features.
So I had a pretty, and growing up in the time that we grew up in, as a woman, so much like internalized like shame and self-loathing, and so I mean, I always grew up with a lot of just real, I was so hard on myself, so hard on myself. And so to have a person that saw the best in me and would always remind me of that, um, not in like the romantic way of like, oh, not in the surface level way that you think about when you think of romantic relationships, but in the way of like, wow, you're so much better than that, like get your shit together, kind of,
Mm.
but loving. And I
Hmm.
think I have a pretty strong memory early on in our relationship where we were living in Valverde, still going to CalArts.
Did you live near John Sanders or Mungus?
I don't know exactly where he was. I do remember he was out there in
Yeah.
Valverde, but yeah, um, it was kind of, like the neighborhood was a little spread out, and that was a whole interesting place to live and be.
Yeah.
But so I remember us having just horrible fights, in college or whatever. A lot of them had to do with my own personal self-esteem,
Mm.
and actually I would say that like maybe like 70% of things that we've, had conflicts over, in our relationship throughout the year had to do with my own like need for external validation, or my own, the difference between how he was raised as a man in his family, how I was raised as a woman in my family,
Hmm.
and expectations that I had versus, like kind of his perspective of, well, if you want something, make it happen. Or, like he's always had a pretty, not ego, he's a pretty humble person, pretty introverted person, but he's always been pretty, self-confident, right?
Hmm.
And I did not have the self-confidence in the same way. I was, and again, I think a lot of that has to do with how we were raised as women at the time. I'm seeing little girls now, and they are just like glowing and shining, and um, they have a better understanding of kind of who they are, or they feel better, or, you know, they treat each other better, right?
Hmm.
And I didn't, that was something that I had to build over time. And so I do remember that at a certain point, like we were having this fight in Valverde, and Eric straight up said to me, um, you know, well, you know, whatever it is that you're going through, like I will be here, it was like there was he made a commitment in the relationship and said it in words, and was like, I'm here for you. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm here for you, and let's, we have to figure out how to work it out. And it was like
Mhm.
my nervous system settled. I realized that I was, the way that I had been acting, this is like early 20s, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
you're still pretty young and formative. But,
Did you have a fear that he was going to leave?
I guess I must have had some sort of, yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what you're taught is like, oh, am I pretty enough? Am I good enough? Am I, I mean, it's rough, as a woman, like the things that you learn and have to unlearn.
Yeah,
And so that's been a huge part of my journey, is, coming into recognition of, my own, being comfortable in my own authenticity, um,
right.
and really having my own back as a person, and not, perpetuating the, messaging that, I received at a young age. But it's hard to do because it's like when your neurons are forming, so you really do. And that's the thing that I've seen also working in theater, working in film, you know especially, not all actors, but I've seen with actors, is that it can be it can be so hard because your whole world is performative, like you're putting yourself out there, and, looking for external approval. So I mean, it's really informed me as an artist to be, um, have strength from within, I guess,
No, I can relate. I still need a lot of external approval, and it's even been kind of I think probably increased because of my vision loss.
Yeah,
So, like, especially because now I don't have the visual reality to inform what's happening.
yeah.
So, I can relate to that. Yeah, yeah, I hear that. So, I mean, I'm fascinated only because I recently, I've been married, will be 2 years now in this coming October, and this is the longest relationship I've ever had in my entire life, and so I'm always, fascinated by people that have been together for, especially your situation where you were together since high school and you're still together, and it seems like who knows what's going to happen, but um it could be 50 years or whatever, so I'm very curious about how you and Eric have created longevity.
I mean, it's really, a lot of it is working on our personal selves. Like, I do have to say.
Hmm.
And I mean, the other thing too is that I think the way that people learn from society about, I mean, watching TV, movies and whatever, you kind of get this messaging that, like, oh, that person is going to complete me or whatever. And the truth of the matter is, in whatever way that other person is completing you, those are areas of growth that you need to work on for yourself. If you don't, if you're not able to, I think in the world as a whole, like not just with relationships, having autonomy is something that, like, society has really, um, messed people up over. And, so, you're in a relationship, but you're autonomous beings, right? Like,
Hmm.
you know, Eric doesn't have power over me. I don't have power over him. We're coming to a place of mutual respect and mutual understanding. And, if there's things that are coming up for him about me and my behavior, then, it's recognizing and understanding that, like, you're always in a negotiation. You're always in, I mean, it's a collaboration in a way. Like, you have to, you have to find ways to communicate. You have to find ways to own your shit.
Right.
And we communicate really differently. I think that it's just work. I mean, I actually have a lot of friends and some family, that have not, they've only had short-term relationships. And the thing that I always try to impress upon them when they ask me this question um, is that you're going to get past that honeymoon phase. Like, you're going to get past the you're not going to always be in the I'm smitten for this person kind of phase. Like, you're going to wake up sometimes and be like, ugh, like that again. It's coming. It's going to happen.
Right.
So, and so it's really, I mean, it's about committing to a thing, and it's about having healthy boundaries and communicating those healthy boundaries too,
Hmm.
because I mean, most of the people I know have grown up with some kind of, um, let's face it, most people's parents didn't, if they were together, they probably didn't necessarily communicate with each other the best. I've only met very few people that had home lives that were the way adults should communicate with each other, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
I
we're
mean,
like relearning, we're figuring it out.
yeah, I'm 43 and I'm still trying to learn
Yeah.
and understand. I mean, I for years before I met my wife, I was like, studying nonviolent communication, and then it just all went out the window
Yeah.
when when the actual
Yeah.
conflicts have come up. And even like the other day, we had an argument, and I was like, "Fuck, man, I didn't use nonviolent communication. I was an asshole." I was accusatory, and like, why? And I have this little thing in the back of my brain that's going, don't say that. Please don't say that. You're gonna mess shit up if you say that. And I said it. And it's just like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I really don't. I don't understand what that is. It's like I feel like it's almost a destructive kind of like a self-destructive thing. It's like, I don't know what it is. It's
It's
fucked up.
reactivity. I mean, it's perfectly human and normal. Like, that's the thing, is we have different um states of consciousness, if you will, where when we're feeling really good, when we're feeling really nourished, when we, you know, have the things that we need, when we're in balance, it doesn't matter what another person's saying. If they're super crabby, or if they're, being a jerk, whatever it is, we're gonna see that through the eyes of love, or we're gonna see that through at least the eyes of patience. We're gonna be like, okay, they haven't had their coffee, they're having a bad day.
Mhm.
We have a little more patience. We're not gonna take it personally, right?
Yeah.
But if we're feeling insecure or shitty, or we woke up on the wrong side of the bed, or kind of,
That's every day for me, but go ahead.
I, I mean, it's, well, it takes work to get out of that. I mean, it's not easy, and especially, I mean, I can totally understand and relate to that in terms of what you're going through. It's like a huge transformation, upheaval, like your sight, your hearing. I mean, that's huge, big stuff. So, yeah, of course. I mean, I have so much empathy for that. Like, of course, you're going to not necessarily, you know, be showing up as your whatever super zen self in every situation, because you're kind of navigating this immense transformation, and like, what's your life going to look like now? So, I mean,
And I have no idea what it looks like,
right.
but
I mean, I would, this whole past year has been me kind of almost living in that state because of
right.
what happened last summer. So
And we're going to get to that, so don't disclose it yet.
I won't. But I guess to close my point, um, you know, when we're not feeling our best, then the reactivity hits, right? And that's, I mean, and it's part of brain, like how our brains are formed. I mean, they talk about whatever, the reptile brain, the old brain. It's the fight or flight or freeze
Hmm.
response. And if you start to understand, I mean, I have anxiety to this day. I have anxiety attacks. I've done a lot of, like, work with therapists, done reading, learned about neurology, different things to basically get to the point where I give myself a frickin' break, and not be so hard and judgmental of myself, and just recognize that, life is change, and, I can try again. I can try again. I can try again. And so with our relationship, sometimes it's just, you're just slightly moving the bar up, slightly moving the bar up, slightly moving the bar, oh, you did that same thing that you did again, and I'm remembering the, you always act this way, blah, blah. Well, I mean, that goes back to the nonviolent communication, is when you're talking in extremes and generalizations, of
which I did
course. Yeah,
on Monday. But yeah, go
right.
ahead.
Yeah, I mean, when we do that, then then it's like, well, wait a minute, all of the work and the growth, I'm not getting credit, I'm not getting validation for all the work and the growth that I've done since then. You're stuck in me 5 years ago or me 6 months ago. And and I get defensive, I get angry about that. I feel like I need to fight about it, or for me, in my case, I mean, I don't know what it is for you, but because of the home situation that I got brought up in, I go to self-annihilation. So I will, rather than go out and be like, you big blah blah, because I grew up in this abusive, yelling and dish breaking and, kind of attack. Like, there was at some point I was like, I am not going to be that. I don't want to fight. I'm not gonna be
Yeah.
my mother or whatever. And so for me, the challenge, the mental health challenge, has been that I go inward and basically, I get self-destructive, and it's taken a lot of therapy and a lot of work for me to get out of that place, and to, plus, I've got to do things to keep myself out of that mental state. I've got to take care of myself, and when I'm not imbalanced and feeling, you know, like I'm safe, just the fundamentals, then that's when I start to have a hard time, So
Yeah, I hear you. I think a lot about that is like balancing having an empathetic lens with the coping of pain and loss
yeah,
and the anger and everything that goes along with that. And so it's just a strange thing. How do you not externalize that anger?
right.
I'm still trying to learn. I mean, it's just it's just an odd place to be. But anyway, so let's get to by the way, say hello to Eric, send him my best.
I will.
I don't think I spoke with him very much, but I do remember he had a very calm, kind spirit. And that I do remember.
Mm.
And I remember you were always together. That's what yeah.
Yeah. Still.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So what happened? What is the one takeaway from CalArts or a memory or something that sticks with you to this day, like that encapsulates your experience there?
um I mean, I would say that
Eucalyptus
it was
trees.
eucalyptus trees. Ooh, that smell. I mean, the moment you say eucalyptus trees, you can smell them, right?
Right. Remember,
Um,
they were right outside if you went on the outside patio for the cafeteria there,
mm-hmm.
they were all
Yes.
out there. Yeah.
Yeah, that big, tall grove that was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I really, the thing that I appreciate the most about CalArts was, the people that I
Mhm.
met. And I've been thinking about that recently too, about, having lost connection. I've reached out to a couple different, um, CalArtians, because I was, we were a community. We were all there. We were all part of something,
Mhm.
and, making art together. I don't know. I think it's really good and healthy for artists to be around other artists and learning with each other, and, across the different disciplines and everything. So, that was my takeaway, was really just, the gift of being around other talented people, or, people that are growing in their art and their talents. And, and when you're around good community, you get inspired, you get, invigorated, or you get, I don't know, catalyzed in a direction. And, so And I think and that's the thing that I do. I wish that I had done more collaboration. I wish that I had worked on more projects with people. I wish I'd had the courage at that time to be creative and work on my own creative projects. I was kind of like living through Eric's, creativity. He was in the art school, um, and but I think that I think I could have taken more advantage of that, of utilizing that space. But I think a lot of it, my self-confidence didn't allow me to actually be an artist at art school. I was a stage manager. I was working with structure and organization. And so it wasn't until afterwards, a few years afterwards, that I started to really, when I was working in theater, that I started to really become introspective and recognize that that I had a creative voice that I wanted to share, or at least engage with, that I wasn't expressing at the time. But I was still with my people. I still felt good and safe being around artists, being around people that are looking at the world and trying to say something about it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I thinking about CalArts, and I think it was really because of the acting class. They were small, or classes were small, and I don't know why I emphasize that so much, but anyway, so yeah, I think it felt like a family. It felt like, we all shared our, our traumas and our experiences, and we kind of had to live within each other because we even had to study each other at one point, and so I have wonderful memories of that place. UCLA was a little bit different, and it wasn't as, being a director, it's a different world because you don't have that. It's a different place. But my point is, yeah, it was definitely a family. And so, what did you do after CalArts?
So when I was just finishing up at CalArts, I actually started production assisting at the Mark Taper Forum.
Oh wow, that was
Yeah.
a you went immediately there. That's amazing.
Yeah, I was still yeah, my final year at CalArts, I had started working at the Mark Taper as a PA,
Okay.
and I was so excited for that position. And yeah, just really thrived doing that. So I PA'd at the Taper for basically as long as I could, until they, kind of kicked me out and told me, you got to move forward in your career path. You can't
Right.
just be a
Right.
PA. But then I was still connected with, kind of with the Taper, and the artistic director at the time, Bob Egan, was also running the Ojai Playwrights Festival. So I started doing stage management with Ojai Playwrights Festival. From there, I connected with, Robbie Bates, who was the, creator of the Brothers and Sisters series, on TV.
Hmm.
But he wrote Ms. Lansky Zelinsky, and, other, let's see, what was it? Desert. I'm terrible that I can't remember his plays right now. But anyway, so he's a playwright. So um, I started actually doing personal assistant, administrative assistant work with him,
Hmm. How was
which
that?
it was really a cool, kind of getting more deeply connected to like Hollywood and artists working in Hollywood,
Hmm.
actors, because he was connected with, quite a few, actors that he'd been working with. We, as artists, we develop these little networks, and then the networks kind of move along with each other, and that's Hollywood. It is definitely nepotism. That's where
Hmm.
I learned the, proximity rule in Hollywood. So
Hmm.
I think that's changed now because of technology, and because of, like, the need for more creative. There's always a need to bring in more, creative, people.
TikTok.
Hollywood's a Oh my gosh. I want to ask you about that, because I mean, I think that it would be something I'd be really excited about. And I heard that you've been playing around with it, but then I don't know, early on I had read the whole thing about Chinese surveillance, and I don't know, do you know anything about that? Is it
I mean, I'm
fake
not worried
news?
about it. I mean, I I don't know. I mean, what happened is with my wife and I, she got on TikTok and she loved it because she was kind of, she was, you know how Facebook was during the pandemic. There was a lot of anger, and
Right.
it was just kind of, it was just not healthy. And
Yeah.
so she's just kind of went over to TikTok just to see what was going on. And she just started to see all these videos and kind of just, they were just light and she was enjoying herself. And then she started to explore ADHD through it because she realized that she identified as having ADHD, and it explained a lot, and it really does. Like, and so she started, every video she found, she'd like send it. She'd be like, see, this is me. This is me.
I'm
And
raising my hand just so you know.
oh, okay. Okay. So ADHD as well.
I
Yeah.
was recognized. I began to recognize that. I was like, whoa.
Well, let's talk about that in a second, but I'll finish this thought. But yeah, so she started doing that, and then we went away in middle of, near the end of May. We went away to Humboldt on just a couple days, just and I started to relax, or I just started to feel good. Like I haven't felt that way in a long time, and we were at the beach, and I was just like thinking of a funny joke. I was like, it was nothing. I was like, I said, take a video of me like pretending to look at the ocean, but I'm looking at the rocks, like thinking it's the ocean, you know, and facing the opposite direction. And she took the video, and I thought she was just going to put it on Facebook. And then she put it on TikTok, and it just went viral. And then we've been kind of doing some videos, and it's been kind of building up and building up. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that, but
I mean, I
yeah,
love it. I mean, it's neat that there's all these different ways to create now. And I just that's the thing that's so fun about technology. I mean, it was when Instagram came out and it was like, whoa, square format. We can work in square format now. Like that's so
right.
exciting. I mean, or even the phone, mobile phone, vertical format. I just think that I mean that's a very simple way of looking at it, but the truth is I don't know. I'm excited about the accessibility of people being able to express themselves creatively in
You
different
explored
ways.
augmented reality and virtual reality,
A little bit. I mean, I put on a VR headset and I started tripping out. Let me tell you. I mean,
right?
it was wild, but yeah. I mean, there's lots of cool stuff with all that, and
Yeah, I think about this the storytelling like possibilities with virtual reality. Like I have a friend, he's the executive director of the Peace Literacy Institute, and that is his like main focus right now is like how to use augmented reality and VR in a way that's peaceful and empathetic and loving, because it could go the opposite way, and it's
right.
more likely that it will be for a lot of cases
Yeah.
because people will explore everything, every
Mm.
desire, everything that they ever, without any real consequences.
Getting all Black Mirror on us, but yeah. Have you watched
Yeah.
that show?
No, I haven't. I haven't watched it. Is it good?
I mean, it's they're the different episodes are directed by different people, so some
Mhm.
episodes are good and some episodes are not, and
Mhm.
or I mean, they just appeal to different people. But
Mhm.
it's all critique on the Black Mirror being media, the
Right.
television, looking
Right.
into our own reflection. But it's I mean I love sci-fi in
Mhm.
general, and so being able to be critical of our culture through media, like through shows like Black Mirror, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I love that. Anybody that's you know that's why I watch a lot of sci-fi is because it's examining like what's happening and why and oh what are the possibilities and I would say that for me my perspective is that Black Mirror skews a little too dark most of the
Mhm.
time. I tend to lean a little more towards whatever
Star
solar punk,
Trek.
I would say like solar punk type,
Okay.
as opposed to the post-apocalyptic hellish
Right.
realms
Fury
of.
Road.
Oh, I have something to say about that, but
Interesting. I
anyway,
want to hear it. Let's hear it. Come on. It's.
well, I wrote a screenplay that was very similar to that
Mhm.
screenplay,
Oh,
very
really?
similar, yeah. And anyway, post-apocalyptic, yeah, that's post-apocalyptic. We can get into that a little deeper maybe some other time, but yeah, I wrote a very similar screenplay to that, and and it was definitely like exploring the post-apocalyptic kind of thing. And you know, I think that it's really interesting that we, you know, are that you know, humans, when I say we, I mean humans, that were exploring, or I guess maybe Hollywood, filmmaking, you know, is exploring the post-apocalyptic more and more and more. It's like trying to get the message across of like what's happening in the world, you know,
Yeah.
how do we
Well, I
look
mean,
at
it's
it?
looking very apocalyptic. I mean,
I mean, and so
very
the thing,
slow degeneration of our everything.
yeah, and so the thing is you also have to, I mean, yes, look like plumbing the depths of the darkness of it all is one way, but I mean, if you don't have a vision of the future, if you don't have a vision of the possible, then then I think that the realm of possibility becomes limited for people in their minds. And so I think that it's good to also have stories that are, you know, that are, and what could be, what could be the future, like what could be a good you know, direction for humanity. And yeah, I would say Star Trek has always been that in a way. You know, Star Trek definitely is like, hey, you know, we're criticizing culture and society. You know, we're criticizing, we're showing how human beings need to grow, but you know, but we're also showing, you know, a bit of, you know, what a utopia, you know, a more maybe an equitable way of being could be, you know. And I just think I find that super important. I mean, remember when Avatar came out and people were flipping out, like I don't know if you heard about that, but there was, they, I forgot what it was like Avatar, people would go and watch Avatar, like they would go watch Avatar because they loved Pandora so much they wanted to, you know, they watched that movie 7, 10, however many times, you
Wow.
know, um you know, that people would leave and they would miss that, like they would actually feel like they want to go watch the movie again because they missed whatever Pandora meant to them. You know, it's
Right.
interesting.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know. I mean, I only saw the movie once, but I mean, I don't remember it having that much of an impact on me. But
I mean, it's
uh,
also a popcorn movie. You know,
yeah, yeah,
it's a certain genre that appeals to certain people. You know, action adventure. You know, sci-fi fantasy thing. But
yeah. I only mentioned Star Trek because I think about you know, it was an ideal that, you know, Gene Roddenberry was trying to live to, and that was that show was the only show that Martin Luther King allowed his children to watch.
wow,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
That,
the realm of possibility. It's super important. And
yeah.
that is the other thing that I think is really exciting about like TikTok and all the different media is because, you know, different people, different cultural groups that have been totally unrepresented, you know, are like also, you know, out there. I have a lot of Native American and First Nations friends, you know, they love native TikTok. I mean, it's blown up, and, you know, it's also a chance to like, I'm going to show my culture. I'm going to show my cultural pride. I'm going to, you know, share about who, you know, who we are as a people, who I am as a person. And I think that that's really another benefit about all these different ways of media going out there is you know, is that accessibility, I guess, you know, for people to express and to be seen, and that, you know, representation matters piece that people are coming to understanding about, right?
Yeah, well, I was just, you know, I think had it not been for TikTok, my wife, um, I mean, it really helped her to kind of come to an understanding about because it's, you know, she has a lot of behaviors that you know, she was just deemed as, you know, her, but they, you know, I don't, she didn't, it really didn't know how to describe him. But when she started watching these videos, she's in sending them, she's just like, see, that's me. And so let's talk about you and ADHD. How did you identify with it and when?
um you know, these words like neurodivergent and all that kind of stuff are, you know, relatively new for, you
Hmm.
know, for me. I didn't grow up knowing words like that, but I did, I was diagnosed with that dyslexia
Okay.
when I was, uh, actually before I was a teenager. So when I was a kid, I didn't actually get an ADHD diagnosis. Um, and I would say that it's also just the way that I think. I've started to come to an understanding that like going into stage management the way that I did was like a structure that helped me to function because I had to follow a structure. And
Mm,
so one of the things that going into my creative work, the big one is the out of sight, out of mind that I found is really interesting about
mm,
with the ADD is if it's not something right in front of me, like it's just gone. Like it just
yeah.
doesn't exist. And and sometimes that can cause, I mean, that can cause difficulty even in, maybe some friendships and stuff where it's not that I don't care and love the people that I'm around, but if I'm, so absorbed in whatever kind of project and I just like I'll forget to reach out, or I'll forget to um, you know, I don't know, some sort of basic things that, so there's like it's like you recognize that you just I don't, I don't see the world, I don't communicate with the world, and I don't think the same uh way. And so having to navigate that, has been really interesting, especially because I, started working for myself and, um, I don't know. I don't think I'd ever really have functioned very well in an office type environment. I think that the freneticism of working in production, in theater and film production, has always been helpful because I've always stayed interested because you're doing this phase and then you're doing this phase and you're doing this phase and and there's a lot of demand and moving around, and so
There's a
that
beginning, a middle, and an end.
yeah, exactly. And there's
Yeah.
different different kind of whatever phases of production that re-engage you.
Right. Right. So, what did you do after the Mark Taper?
Let's see. So I did a little work off Broadway, and then Eric got hired to work on a film, 3D animated film in London, England, and we weren't married at the time. And while I was working in, well, I was working in LA, and I was working also, and I worked in New York. Um, we were basically at some point of us being apart for that long, which we
How
hadn't been.
long?
I think the first run of time we were apart for about 6 or 7 months,
And
and
how did you
then
deal with that? Because you were together all the time before
it
that, right?
it was okay in California, the time difference that we would just, talk every, well, we did IMing, a lot of IMing at the time,
Mm,
AOL instant messaging.
right.
So we did do that, and then, yeah, and then we would talk pretty much every day, which I don't know how we paid for the phone bill at the time, but we did, and stayed
This
in
was
touch.
before unlimited minutes, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. This
Yeah.
was like, yeah, when you had to pay for, well, and also international calling too.
Did you get the cards?
Yeah, oh yeah, the little phone cards, and
Yeah.
yeah, you pay for your minutes. So that was fine, but when I was working in New York, it was pretty rough because the time difference, I think it's only I think it's 5 hours time difference. So it was like, I would be going to bed before he was waking up, and he would be at work when I would be, asleep. And so it was really like we had to be very strategic about being able to actually, I'd get home from rehearsal at, 10, 11 o'clock at night and be calling him, and it would be way early in the morning for him. Uh, we started going a little crazy because we weren't able to stay as connected. And then, of course, I was working on uh, a show at the time, so I wasn't able to. I was busy, and he was busy. He was working on deadlines for, a film getting produced, and so yeah. So he proposed, and we were like, okay, let's do it. And so we had a funny. So I had a interesting situation with the play that I was working on at the time, where um, for whatever reason, the lead actor was going away because, and so we were going to actually have 3 days off, which is unheard of in theater. That we were gonna have opening night, and then we would have a couple days off, and then we would start up again for the Sunday matinee. That we would start again, have a Sunday matinee evening show, and so that, and when we found out what the schedule was going to be, uh, Eric flew from London to New York, and we let family know, and they came out, and um, I, we opened the show. We had the opening night performance, and then the next morning, we went to City Hall and got married, and then how did that
Oh,
go? Anyway, it was, and the cast party, the opening night party for the show was basically like our wedding celebration. So we were like fitting in getting married in the middle of theater production, and him taking time off from and so then I went and lived in London. I was in England, and that was like a completely new experience to be in the UK, in a totally different culture, recognizing for the first time actually what sexism was, like, to an extreme. Like, I England is
hold on. Before you get into this, I don't want to be too far away from this. How did he propose?
on instant messenger.
Really?
So very modern.
Really?
Yeah.
How did you feel about that?
I mean, it wasn't like we hadn't talked about it,
Did you have a fantasy though that he'd be like
down on one knee or something.
on a mountaintop in some
I'm
enchanted
sure I
place?
did. I grew up with princess movies like everybody else.
Right, right.
Um, but
So
no,
is he like just like AOL just being like, so you want to do it?
no, I
And
mean, it wasn't as casual as that, but it was like, we should get married, and I did. I used to have it saved somewhere. I haven't, I don't have that computer anymore, but yeah, I mean, I mean, he was very sweet, and then I thought he was joking, and it was a little, because it was so, it was very kind of casual sort of
yeah.
thing, you know. Yeah, I mean, I think we were also kind of, I don't know, we we haven't really been big on romantic gestures. I mean, we've just, like I said, we're family. Like, we've been around each other so much that we have like a comfortability.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, not to say that we don't also like find ways to celebrate our, relationship and things like that. But, in that situation, and then we had big plans of what a huge, we wanted to have a big wedding, and we were going to maybe have at a castle in Italy, or, I mean, because he was
Mm.
in the UK, and we had all these big, and in the end it was like, no, no, let's make it happen, and then I can come over to London and be on your work visa. So there's like a lot of practicality with it as well, you know.
So let's go back to London. So there was sexism there.
I mean, it's just culturally different for me. He loved it. I mean, he
Mm.
was like, men are king of the world there,
Hmm.
and there is a lot of like kind of cavalier. I mean, there is in the U.S. too. What am I saying? But I don't know what it is. It's just different, and
Do you think the patriarchy is a little bit more apparent in the UK than it is here?
uh,
Is it because of the royalty?
I think that I mean, things may have changed now, but the way that I kind of saw it the most is I had so many self-confidence issues as a woman growing up, and
Hmm.
seeing the kind of self-confidence issues. But the thing is that at least, you know in the US, that the women are at least externally, even if it was more of in a fakey way when we were growing up, presented as like, strong women, and we're out there and we can do it. And there was a very kind of like, I guess the cultural stories are different, whereas
Yeah, and
in
I
the
mean, in the United States, I think the some forms of feminism are just kind of corporate feminism, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's true,
Yeah,
but the point is the wider cultural story is, empowered women, and women can be doctors, and we can do whatever we want, at least on some level,
right,
wider level. That's at least how, it's coming to reckoning now, but that's at least how we like to think of ourselves, or we like to say, even if it's bullshit,
right.
or if it has been bullshit. Whereas over in the UK, I'm not sure if they've received that same amount of messaging. Or I don't even know if that's what it was, but overall, there was I just saw a lot of self-destructive behavior, a lot of um, you know, kind of turning in, and anyway, I felt different being from the US, I felt like I had like a more general confidence, and I also felt like I had maybe a little more general, um, I don't know. It was the first time where, I mean, I went into a bank there and was like, oh, I'm so and so's wife, and blah blah blah. They don't have a national ID system there, and they're like, oh, you're his wife, and give me the information. I mean, I was like, what? Like, so it was different. It was strange. It was, people would talk to your husband first, kind of stuff. Like, it was little things,
Right. Yeah.
little sort of subtle things. Um, so yeah, I mean,
Which kind of said where the power resided.
yeah, kind of,
Yeah.
I mean, and that was again just my perspective,
Right.
of whatever. Yeah.
So I have to ask you because you have worked with one of my favorite playwrights of all time, Athol Fugard, the author of my favorite play, The Island. So where was that?
That was at the Mark Taper Forum.
Oh, it
I
was.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was a PA on a play, Sorrows and Rejoicings, that he was producing at the time. Judith Light was in it, and yeah, it was awesome to see him work, and he
What
was
year was that?
2001 ish, two
Oh,
ish.
wow. There's such a tie to that because I had a girlfriend at the time that was going to UCLA. I was still at CalArts, so that was our last year.
Hmm.
And she would tell me that Judith Light would come into her classes because Judith Light was taking classes there, but she was also doing a show at the Taper Forum. So that
Yeah,
was obviously it.
yeah, yeah. Must have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was really I don't know, to work with someone that was so um I mean, he's an elder of the craft. That's the other thing, I
Yeah.
think he was 70 at the time. I think he might have
Hmm.
been 70 then. And so he was very extremely like healthy and vibrant and had a lot of energy in the body, moving a lot,
Hmm.
and I had this book, which, I don't have anymore, sadly, but I had this book where I had written down all of his isms and quotes, and I had lots of beautiful little nuggets of wisdom, I mean, from small to big, jasmine is an adulterated tea, things like that. I mean, it was just really, you couldn't help but, I don't know, like, look up to a person that was, yeah, just very clear. And the other thing that's really cool about working at the Taper is I mean, he was the director and the playwright. So
Yeah.
seeing his writing process and seeing, how he would change a scene or change a word, or, it was, yeah, incredibly inspiring to see, yeah, to see him work, and, you know, bring him his rooibos tea, which
Right.
was, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, I wish I could have been there because yeah, I really love his play The Island. But so where did you go? Like, so you went to the UK and then what happened after that?
Yeah, I lived in the UK. It was during Bush W era, so the election happened at the time.
Where were you on 9/11?
Uh, I was in Valverde, so I was
Okay.
still, yeah, I was still in and commuting into LA, I think, at the time then, because
Okay.
that was, yeah, um, yeah. So, um, but yeah, it was, so post that, it was still pretty, yeah, it was interesting living in a foreign country, and so the really beautiful thing about living in London is it was the first time I felt connected to the rest of the world. I didn't realize like what an island the US is,
Hmm.
how it really, considers itself to be so separate, and even like your perspective as being from the US is, seeing yourself as the whole world, because it is such a big country.
Yeah.
And being in the UK, I mean, I was seeing there was so much more. I mean, even, more than LA or even New York, there were people from all over the world. London's a hub,
Hmm.
so, different kind of it was kind of similar to the way New York is. LA is more spread out, like kind of cultural pockets of this and that, but yeah, it was just, yeah, such a beautiful, like, people from all over, meeting people, and I had friends from New Zealand, and I had friends from Nigeria, and I had friends from South Africa, and friends from all over the world, for the first time. And and also, like, the news, they're more part of the world. It's more, so I knew a lot more about, over there, was learning a lot more about, like, what was going on, you know in different places, even the places people would go visit. I'm taking a trip to Africa, Morocco, and everywhere, all these places that were much more accessible, because you're there, like, you're closer. So I wish I had been able to do more traveling at the time, but I did little visits here and there. It was great. And also learning what it was to be a foreigner in
Yeah.
in a different world, and what that looked like, to be seen differently, perceived differently, and criticized for being American
Hmm.
and whatnot. So it was an interesting time, and a big, and that was when I chose to step away from doing stage management. I kind of went into this whole, like, oh, well, for
That's a
one,
lovely transition, by the way. Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So
So how did, I mean, yeah, I'm being serious though. How did you make that transition out of stage management? What was the
um
catalyst for that?
I realized that if I kept going in my career trajectory, that I'd basically be doing the same job for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And it just was, like, so utterly, like, seemed kind of, well, it seemed like there was a my creative part of myself wouldn't be expressed. I would be always working on someone else's vision, which I love, you know, but I
As
was,
part of the collaborative process.
yeah, I love the collaborative process. To this day, I love the collaborative process, but I also, I realized that I didn't have a voice in the room, other
Hmm.
than, sort of safety and, structure and, mediation. I loved doing mediation, like helping actors from losing it and directors fighting with, I mean, I loved that aspect of it.
Hmm.
Because I also worked outside of the taper. I did small theater. Did small theater around LA, for a few years as well, post that. So, yeah, I mean, I just realized that I was denying a whole part of myself, by just kind of, um, focusing on this one aspect. And then I also realized I was fucked up. That was at that time, in my early 20, in my
What
early
was
20s. I
fucked
was
up?
like, that I had some serious mental health stuff that I needed to address, that I had to, like, reconcile my childhood, my teenage years,
Was
and that
that
I
the learning about your mother's borderline personality
no,
disorder?
actually, that's only been more recently that I've really come to an understanding of what that could potentially be,
Hmm.
right? You know, that's been years of work, but at that time it was just like, um, again, it was back to the, um, yeah, why do I hate myself? Or why do I, or all the anger. You're talking about the anger, like having so much anger and so much, you know, um, ways of not being able to just move through the world easily, you know?
Hmm.
So
So
drama.
was there a moment in your stage management career that really kind of stands out as a beautiful moment, or something that you'll all remember, that you're like, I'm glad that I went on that journey, even though I'm transitioning into something different?
I mean, I it was a little bit later that I started to realize that the people that I worked with, like Athol Fugard, I worked on an August Wilson play. Like, I had some amazing opportunities to see people at the height, of their, um, established artists working, and their process. So when I realized, I mean, I feel like it all built up, you know, as a learning for myself, you know, and so
Did it
it's not just
energize you
one.
seeing like August Wilson and like their process and being like, I want to do that?
I didn't like quite get to that at the time.
Uh-huh.
And it was afterwards when I was reflecting where I was realizing that, like, when I got to the point where I was like, you know, I'm stepping out of doing stage management, that I was, a part of me had shut down my voice,
Mhm.
you know. I had shut down my own desire for creative expression, you know, and really because I just always felt like I was not good enough or could never be good enough. I mean, which I
Mm.
think is like, I can't speak for every artist, but I do have to say that, you know, do we ever feel like we're good enough? You know, do we ever feel, you know, they talk about imposter syndrome or whatever, you know, I think that um, that's real, you
Yeah.
know, is so, but yeah, I mean, as a whole, I have lots of really beautiful, you know, I have lots of different memories of just seeing plays come together and,
Can you offer one from August Wilson?
hmm, I mean, I would say, well, okay, so he opened the show with
What show is it?
it was King Hedley II,
Okay.
and Harry Lennox was the lead. He's amazing. I had a huge crush on him, giant crush on him.
How did Eric
Um,
deal with that?
oh, he loved it. He thought it was great. He teased me. In fact, he actually, I was a little. I'm not one to be shy around. You know, I've worked with, you know, professional actors, but for some reason I had a big crush on him. And
Mhm.
Eric, I think at one point teased me about it, and I don't know. He said something, and later I was like, "Why did you say that?" You know, but whatever. I think Harry just kind of laughed it off, but
Right.
I don't remember what it was. But yeah, August opened the play with one ending or one way of it ending, and then it just wasn't working. It just wasn't working. And so it was just like a few days late, you know, he rewrote a whole ending. Like he changed this monologue and that monologue. I mean, it was, and just, I mean, to see someone in a process with their work that way and to have the confidence to be like, you know, a show that's out there in previews in front of an audience, and it's, you know, he was unhappy and it wasn't working, and for him to come in and to make, you know, a giant monologue changes, and, you know, we were getting new pages every day, like, just to see that 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 art is a process, you
Hmm.
know, and they do say that, like, that um you never stop working on your creative project, it gets taken away from you, you know.
Yeah.
And so that was really incredibly inspiring to see that, you know, and for him to be like, yeah, no, that's bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that I mean, it takes courage to have that honesty and like he could have just said it's good enough, you know.
Mm,
But yeah. Are you still there?
I'm here. I was drinking water.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what was the catalyst again? Position. I know you said about
I mean, it was
you wanted to express yourself and then
getting
uh
married, moving to London, realizing that, you know, I was in a choice point where I could stay in New York and keep working on, you know, plays as a stage manager,
mhm.
or I could, you know, go and live in London in a foreign country, you know, get married and figure it out, whatever I was going to do. And yeah, and I just recognized that I was like, actually, I don't think that I want this to be my career. I don't know what I want my career to be, but I want to be able to I want to be able to be a part of the creative process as a creator more, is what I recognized.
Okay.
So
So what did you end up creating?
um well, eventually I got into screenwriting. I started taking directing classes. After we lived in London, we moved to Vancouver on a show, on another animated film that was getting produced in Vancouver, Canada. And living in Vancouver, I started taking some directing classes and doing directing little pieces for the camera and collaborating with other artists up there. And then I started, and then Eric as well, even though he was in like almost sometimes 60-hour plus work weeks. Um,
And he was doing what did you say, animation or something?
yeah, he was editing. He was working as an editor for 3D animated film up in
Okay.
Vancouver, and I was trying to. I couldn't get work in Vancouver. That was the other thing that was really interesting. As
Mhm.
being from the U.S. and living in Vancouver, it, I couldn't get a job. It
Okay.
doesn't matter what it was. It was they look on your resume and they see that you're from the U.S. and they're like, nope. So
Did you at least get to have some of the healthcare?
yeah, I mean, we did have healthcare. Although
Yeah.
the real experience with healthcare was back when we were in the UK,
Right.
which was amazing. I mean, it was amazing, the socialized healthcare, because
Right.
but anyway, that's another whole facet. So then I moved into doing some writing and kind of pushing through creative blocks and fears, and we produced our own 16 millimeter film, indie film, um, up in Vancouver. So
Entitled.
it was called Ray Diluted.
Okay.
It doesn't exist anywhere now.
Okay.
The Unfortunately, although I do think that there might be like a print like stored at Technicolor somewhere that I would have to get out of Hawk, but
Mhm.
for the most part, it was right at the edge of, do you film on film or do you do digital? Like, it was
Mm.
sort of, that kind of thing. But we were really into kind of like a throwback of wanting to do things kind of very analog,
Mhm.
and and I call it my guerrilla indie feature,
Mhm.
because it was just, it was Eric and I, and then whoever we were able to kind of pull together to be a part of it. And that was a super fun experience. And so I wrote and directed that, and Eric and I produced it together, and yeah, and learned a
What did
lot.
you learn from that?
Oh my God, everything.
Right.
For one, it was just like a huge risk, and I had not really that big of an understanding of what I was doing or getting into. I hadn't taken extensive courses or anything. I was really just kind of trying to step into doing filmmaking from having seen films, having watched films, and then a little bit of direct, and of course all my experience working in theater, you know. But I learned, um, I mean, organizing the whole production aspect was super familiar. Uh, I learned, I don't know, I stepped forward in terms of having a creative voice, um, and had a lot of fun experimenting. Oh, and the big thing that I did learn is when you're producing something, because it was all, kind of out of pocket kind of thing, is unless people are getting paid well as professionals, that whatever creative blocks you're navigating, other people are navigating. So it's very hard to collaborate, with people that are not working on their own passion project. If it's your passion project, how to keep those people, excited. They're putting a lot of time and they're putting a lot of energy
Mhm.
into something. But at a certain point, roadblocks will be hit. And so I think the value of, being able to have the kind of budget where you can pay people, which we did not at
Yeah.
all. Like, we took care of people and fed people and did everything that we could possibly do. But, making films, especially then, is so expensive to
You
do.
didn't have Star Wagons?
No Star Wagons. Yeah, it was very much the, found the friends to help to serve the food and paid for all the food to have the catering, and
Right.
you know renting a lot of the equipment, most of the equipment. And so uh but it was a blast. I mean, we all did have a really good time working on it. um so
Yeah, and that's, I that's that's what I always talk about. I love the process. The process is the show was okay, but the process was where I found the most joy in the rehearsal process.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hear what you're saying. So you started to work as a screenwriter after that, right?
Yeah, so completing that film got my foot in the door to be able to do some rewrites, like for screenplays. So I started getting hired to do some rewrites, and then and was able to have good kind of conversations with producers that had kind of existing properties that they needed, that they were kind of trying to shop around town. So I learned a lot about kind of Hollywood and how it works, and
Hmm.
how you develop a project and how you get a project going and out there. And so yeah, I got eventually it led to me getting hired for to do a major like page one rewrites for three different scripts.
Hmm.
Um, and and yeah, and then then I was writing. I was doing writing, screenwriting, and that was yeah, that was great and went on for a while. But it was definitely pre Me Too. So yeah, being a woman in the industry is interesting as well.
Hmm.
At the time, and
What
yeah.
is the project, the screenplay that you're most proud of?
Um, well, I would have to say that well, that's hard to say. I mean, I was actually proud of every little one of the little projects that every I say little, but some of them were over 90 page scripts. I mean, I was proud of each of them in their own way because I learned, they were mostly kind of either like a sci-fi or fantasy genre. Some were for animated film. Some were, potentially to be like a live action or a live action animated hybrid type film. And when I mean, just writing a screenplay is such a huge process, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I learned a lot from each one of them, and I feel really proud of. I mean, anytime I complete a screenplay, I'm like, oh my god, I completed it. It's like pat myself on the back, like
Right.
and then to go through a whole rewrite process because it's you submit to producers and then they don't like it and they want a new rewrite and then you and I had one screenplay that was actually a Dark Wizard of Oz retelling, Oz Wars, and I literally did at least two different page one rewrites of the same project where I did one where it was like a, big kind of, epic version, sort of something more like Alice in Wonderland, the Tim Burton Alice Wonderland that
Hmm.
had come out, that was later on at the time. So I'd done one huge big sort of epic one, and then I did another one that was just, like a sort of a stop animation, different kind of version. And they were two completely different scripts, but they were like the same concept, and it was like how to trying to get that out there, trying to get some interest in it, kind of thing. So I mean, even that, like taking the same idea and having two totally different versions and scripts of it was fun. So yeah.
Where did you go from there?
So from there, so Eric and I were doing some development producing and trying to get some, we were working with a producer, and also trying to get some different projects, come brought in and greenlit, and reading a lot of properties, like different like comic books or books, what would be good to develop into a screenplay, like that kind of stuff. And then we sort of shifted into wanting to do sort of self-production type stuff. And then yeah, at a certain point I kind of soured on the whole, um, just being in LA. It just wasn't
Yeah.
really in alignment for me. I
Hmm.
wasn't getting what I needed, and I wasn't able to like walk every day in authenticity and feel like I was, I really did have a hard time, um, having my own, like I was go back to confidence coming from inside yourself. I got a
Hmm.
little, um, so externally focused of needing outside approval and, judging my creative work. And it wasn't good for my mental health. And I was like, I got to get out. And I had a big health crisis also at the time. I started, we started working on our own little animated projects, and that was kind of fun because we worked with some different, um, we've worked with some different indigenous people on developing some projects. That was really neat, like fun collaborations. Um, yeah, meanwhile, I was like traveling, like went down to Peru and spent some time in
Now,
Peru
was
with
the
some
trip to
experiences.
Peru health related? Were you
Yeah, it was health related. I had like a
ayahuasca?
yes, yeah. I had a serious health issue come up, and so that was part of it, was me looking to find some kind of um what's the underlying cause of the issue.
Are you okay
Um
now?
yeah, I mean, I'm okay now, but it's been like a lifelong affected thing. So I have endometriosis.
Hmm.
And it can be incredibly painful, and
Now, what is that exactly?
it is so it's an inflammation. It's actually an autoimmune, and it
Okay.
affects reproductive organs. It affects like the inside of the body, and yeah, I don't want to get too like into the nitty gritties of it. It could be
Hmm.
Googled, but the truth is that it's one of those kind of conditions that affect people on the inside, but they look fine on the outside.
Hmm.
You can have tremendous, like, pain and physical symptoms, and um, and people don't, people are going about their day-to-day lives, and they're dealing with, a lot happening inside their bodies that's really incredibly painful. So yeah, so part of my healing work was, yeah, going down to Peru and working with some traditional medicine healers down there. And that was really helpful on physical and emotional levels. So,
What did you see on ayahuasca?
I mean, that's a really interesting question, because what do you mean by that? I'd like you to frame it a little bit more.
Well, I mean, I know people have intense visions, whether, they see people that are not living, or they see demons, or they see kind of mythical creatures, or different things when they do the ayahuasca. So I'm just curious if you had any of those type of experiences, or was it different?
I mean, yes, and I guess I will say. Um, I think that the thing that's interesting about that is that there's like kind of this attitude or focus on like what's this visionary thing that takes place, like there's this there's this way that people look at psychedelics that's a very
Mm-hmm.
like Western minded way, which
Mm-hmm.
is I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take a psychedelic, and I'm gonna trip out, man. Gonna have all this trippy stuff happen, you know. And but I mean, in terms of like my experiences, I mean, yeah, sure, yeah, trippy stuff happens, absolutely. Like that's not necessarily I don't know, the point, but
No, no, no. I hear you.
very,
I'm the
yeah.
reason I'm asking. My father-in-law has OCD,
Mhm.
and he went down there many times,
Mhm.
and to kind of work on that.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and and so I'm just curious about people's experiences on it. I haven't
Yeah.
done it, so I don't know. The only thing I've ever done is salvia, which
Mhm.
only
Oh,
lasts like 5 minutes.
yeah. And did you see someone that had passed away? Because that's what I've heard.
No, no. I mean, I've heard various different like experiences of what people have had going specifically to Peru and doing that. But
Mm.
but in Salvia, I just remember. Well, I was doing it with my roommates at the time,
Yeah.
and they were like, I was getting ready for it. So at the time I was practicing Buddhism. So I was sitting in front of, I had a Buddhist altar. I was practicing Zen Buddhism, moving into a different type of Buddhism. And I just was sitting there, and I had a light that was shining on the statue of the Buddha. And I just remember my roommates were like doing windmill arms around me, like trying to get me to trip out because, and I just, all I remember was everything was shimmering, like that stereotypical like shimmering that, you know,
Hmm.
you see in the movies when somebody takes a substance, um, and I do remember I remember seeing something that was really interesting. I remember seeing the wood from the first home that I grew up in, and the rafters of that home and how it made me feel. And it just it. I had a memory. It was very specific, but other than that, that was it. And then another friend of mine had the stereotypical bugs crawling on him, and but I didn't
Hmm.
have that.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
But
Um,
so it did help.
yeah, I mean it also, I mean the other thing that I recognize is that was, I mean, being like working with ayahuasca as a medicine, I realized that I did have for the first time, I'd never been like I said, I'd never been like diagnosed with anything.
Hmm.
So I'd never I had navigated not being on any kind of like medication my whole life.
Hmm.
And working with ayahuasca, part of like I realized also, I was like, oh, you know what? I have a chemical imbalance in my brain, because one of the ways that it also it can be an antidepressant as well.
Right.
That's one of the things that it does. And so yeah, so I really started um, it was a really beautiful catalyst for me to take responsibility for my personal health in a
Right.
way that I hadn't before. And on all levels, on the physical level, but then also, whoa, I have a chemical imbalance in my brain. What can I do? What kind of practices do I need to integrate into my life so that I can live a happier, more balanced way, you know?
Hmm.
And I, I'd been working on that kind of stuff since moving to London. I'd been kind of connected with, alternative medicines and, energy healing, different holistic type perspective from then, and had been looking into all sorts of different things from acupuncture and Chinese medicine to um, other practices, and but working with ayahuasca was really definitely, yeah, helped me to take responsibility for my own life, you know in a different way than I had before. um, so yeah,
What do you think the reason for that was?
I well, so the thing that's really interesting about ayahuasca is, I mean, it's the way that people talk about it, especially in the Western world now, is they get very focused on that specific, like taking ayahuasca, and uh, you know, um, that experience becomes the important thing. But actually, in a more traditional context, at least the way that I learned from the indigenous people that were, um, that it's their tradition, the Shipibo people,
Mm.
they, it's something that would be, the average person wouldn't be drinking ayahuasca all the time.
Yeah.
They would go to a medicine man healer who would, be giving, they would, and actually generally that medicine man would be the one that would take ayahuasca. He would be go into the visionary state and would give them a diagnosis, and then help them, get connected to the different herbal, decoctions and plant medicines that they might need to help them with whatever their healing crisis might be.
Mhm.
Um, but the other thing is that having a recognition of a visionary state, like an epiphanic state, is the kind of thing that happens like maybe once in a lifetime, like, as a rite of passage, let's say. So it's
Mhm.
incredibly transformative because, in this day and age, we don't have necessarily we don't have rites of passage in the same way, where I am one way and I die to that old way of being, allow myself to completely transform, and when I get through the other side, uh, I'm new, I'm transformed, I've changed, I've shed my previous skin, I've let go of that, I've, you know, so
You feel
um,
like you've transformed?
I mean, I feel like my life is about transformation. I feel like
Mm.
there's, that's the kind of thing, life is about transformation. For somebody that, for somebody like me, who I mentioned before kind of turns inward in a self-destructive way. People that, have um, experienced suicidal ideation, people that have felt this self-annihilation. Um, One of the things that I recognized with these different practices that I've got involved in is that if I start to feel that way, that is a part of that means that there's a part of me that needs to die, that needs to change, that needs to be allowed to change. And it really helped me shift my mindset when my mind would go in that direction, where I started to, like I said, take ownership of my life and recognize that if that feeling's arising, that I need to turn towards that feeling, because maybe there's something big that I need to change about myself. Maybe there's something about myself that I'm denying. And so when you come back to this kind of concept of a rite of passage, that allows that to take place. You aren't who you were stepping through the door as you are coming out of the door. And I think that we, as human beings, need to allow ourselves to change as often as possible. You know, I mean, we regrow the cells in our body like every 7 years, I think I read somewhere. So 7 years from now, the cells that exist are totally brand new. They're not actually the same cells that I was born with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, so on that level, it's like, okay, we're always changing, we're always transforming. It's our minds that get fixed, in a fixed state of being. So,
right,
we got to help the brain. We have to help the mind sometimes
right.
to catch
S-
up, to get current.
So, when did you make the decision to leave Los Angeles behind and walk through the door to? Did you move to Ben Lomond
So I'm living,
or
so I'm
Felton?
actually in Santa Cruz, and the little community is Bonnie Doon,
Okay, yeah,
which is Santa Cruz Mountains. So it's above Felton and Ben Lomond in the mountains.
yeah. I know that area very well. I went to high school in Los Gatos.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I've been here, I think it's about 8 years now that I've been here.
Hmm.
And I was in Santa Cruz, like the city, um, or the town, I should say, compared to LA. But the city of Santa Cruz, I was there for a couple years, and then finally I was able to um, get a place up in the mountains in Bonnie Doon, which is in the beautiful redwood forest.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah, it's gorgeous there.
oh, it's so amazing. And I was actually kind of afraid to do that. I've always lived in either city or suburb.
Hmm.
And so the idea of being like 20 minutes, well, no, that's not true. When I lived in Valverde, we were about 20 minutes from the nearest grocery store in town. Um, but yeah, but it was like out in the deep dark woods, and I was like, oh, I knew I wanted to live in tall trees. Like I had felt a calling to live in the forest, because after living in Vancouver, which is all forested, that shifted me to being more connected to outside lifestyle,
Hmm.
being up in BC, the year I moved there was 40 days of rain straight. So if people don't, put their rain jackets on and get out there, like they'll be inside all the time.
Yeah,
I mean, they're a rainforest up there. And so, as a person in LA, where, growing up in Southern California, where it's like, oh my God, it's raining, let's all stay inside, like it's not safe, we're all gonna die,
right,
don't drive in the rain, kind of thing. And then being up in Canada, being up in BC, it was like, well, if you don't go, you'll never go outside. You'll just
right.
be, And so yeah. So I really got more, connected with being outside, being in nature, and it reinvigorated me. It was really good for my system, my whole nervous system, my body. And so we moved up into the woods, and yeah, it's been amazing to be in a more, rural area.
Now you started a business up there, right?
Yeah, so yeah, I started a business, intentional video, uh,
Okay.
just using our skills from, it was video production. So we're doing video production. I was doing some music videos, but basically, mostly corporate video because it's like we're here over the hill from Silicon Valley, in Santa Cruz, it's, small, medium-sized businesses. So I was like, well, if you're used to being in the film industry, what kind of skills can you apply? We're still an hour and a half away from San Francisco, so I wasn't like ready to pick up any kind of commute into that city.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, what can you do to make ends meet? Just outside of the city. So yeah, I started doing, corporate video, which has been fine. And, but then also shifting. Now I have my new businesses, Emerging Beyond or Emerging Beyond Films. And we're focusing more on doing kind of animation work. So we've been producing little animated pieces and, yeah, so we're at a big shift. I'm sure you're going to bring it up now in the last couple minutes of our of our podcast. I'll let you, but I'm transforming yet again.
Right. Right. No, no, but what is the theme of the work that you do with those film projects? Those
um,
animation projects, excuse
yeah,
me.
the animation projects. So I mean, that's where my creative expression is coming out. I've done I have several different projects, but it's all about um, kind of in evoking emotion, um, you know, bringing bringing stories that maybe aren't the kind of stories that are at the forefront to the forefront. Shifting the way people think about things. You know, yeah, they're mostly generally could be kind of in the for my own films that I'm producing and working on. They're kind of more maybe a little bit, sci-fi, a little bit, yeah, they're more, on an art in the realm of art as opposed um, formulaic.
Right. Right.
They're creative and exploratory, and then and so then also yeah, we're also doing like little weird animated pieces that are just um, yeah, something different, kind of outside the norm, kind of something that's, interesting. And, we incorporate live action and animation as well as part of what we're doing. Um,
Hmm.
Playing with things like photogrammetry, you know, um, so yeah, it's stuff that's interesting, interesting to us and, people that are looking for kind of very, uh, a different, different kind of style animation, which is, yeah, not just the sort of straightforward 3D type stuff that everybody's used to right now.
Right. Now, in the midst of creating all this, something very profound happened last year.
Yeah, so yeah, last August, it's about almost a year, um, my house and my home business burned down in a fire. um, so
And what fire was that?
it was the CZU Lightning Complex fire.
Okay.
And so there was a huge lightning storm that came through, dry lightning,
Hmm.
and
Which is unusual for that area.
it is, yeah, I've very rarely seen lightning up here.
Yeah,
and
very unusual for that area.
and it was actually like really, before we were actually recognizing that fire was a danger, like in the moment, the night, like I was up, like the lightning woke me up.
Hmm.
It was like you could feel the electricity in the air, and yeah, and it was I was outside. I spent the whole night outside, like watching, thousands and thousands of lightning strikes happening, and then also like the sheet lightning happening, which I love. I've spent time, in the Dakotas and everything, so I've seen the big lightning storms by now. But unlike California, we don't get them as much.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I was like, whoa, this is cool. Like there's some big transformational thing taking place now, and boy,
Did
it
you
sure
capture
did.
any of it on video?
Uh, no, no, it was kind of like, I would have to say it was kind of like a sacred moment. It wasn't like the kind of thing where I was gonna set up cameras and stuff. I was
Right.
really kind of deeply connecting to what was going on in the cosmos or in the
Right.
sky, I guess, and just kind of soaking it up. And yeah, and then but it did light. It started several fires, and then those fires spread, and I forgot exactly how many thousands, tens of thousands of acres burnt in the end, and then just under 1,000 homes in the area in the Santa Cruz Mountains burned, and yeah, my home and home business is one of them. So yeah, we lost everything. That our house burnt to the ground, and we were able to get out. We got a call about 3 a.m. and evacuated. Or a little before that, we spent about an hour kind of getting stuff into the car and loading the cat up in the cat carrier, and you know, picking what's going to go in the car, and then never, you know, I think it was 2 days later, because it was mandatory evacuation. You couldn't get back up once you were out. Yeah, so 2 days later, we heard from a friend who had stayed and was helping to fight the fires. He went up and took pictures, and yeah, everything was gone. It was all, yeah, it was all ashes. So
When you saw those photos, what were your first thoughts?
it was very surreal. Like, it was really difficult to process, you know. We'd been on edge for a few days because the fire had been burning for a few days, and we weren't hearing anything. And there actually wasn't, so the area where our home burnt, it was something like a 200-foot tall wall of fire that came through. Um, there was
It's
just no
intense.
way. Yeah, there was just no way that anybody, uh, that those homes could have been saved at that point. You know,
Yeah.
it would have had to have stopped beforehand. And we actually didn't think the fire was going to be able to make it up the mountain to us. It was actually a significant distance away. So
Mm.
leaving, I had no, in my mind, I was like, no, no, the fire's not going to reach here. It's far, like we could see the orange in the distance. And I did get one photo of seeing the orange far in the distance, amongst the trees, like a glow from where
Mm.
it was on fire. But it was like there was a whole canyon and a valley, and have to go up the mountain, and I didn't, I had no, I was like, no, there's no way it won't there's no way that it'll reach our house, and it did.
Mm.
So yeah, and then that was really hard because it was like losing literally everything but what we fit in our car that night.
Yeah.
So I didn't even have a storage unit. I had closed down my storage unit, and I had, that was it. So what was in that house was everything. So
So when you realized that the it sunk in everything was gone, what did you do next?
um I mean, it was shock. Like, I was just in shock, and then it was an ongoing fire. So we were staying with my friend, who her home was a little bit further away. We had evacuated to a place, a friend of her coworker, was like away on vacation, was like, you can stay at my house, we're going to be gone for a couple weeks, and please feel free to be at home, knowing the fires were going on. And so it was mostly just like following the news and finding out, like, what, how many houses were burning, following, like, I was looking for, you're just kind of sucked into it, because it's like the whole world is, your whole world and your neighborhood and your neighbors and their homes, it's like you're really just kind of in shock. And so it was mostly like following the news, a lot of that, and trying to get footage, you know seeing familiar places on fire, things like that. The home we had lived in just before this place we had moved into was like kind of an ideal. We'd only lived there for a month and a half, and before that we lived 6 years in a very smaller place. And so moving in there, I was like so happy, because I found like a really, like, my ideal kind of rental home situation.
Yeah.
And but our previous place that we had lived in for 6 years also burnt to the ground and was not that far away. So it was like losing, you know, kind of almost like losing two places that you felt really connected to. Yeah, it was really strange. And then you just don't have anything. So that's it's been such an interesting process. It's like still extended to now, where it's just real, it's like you're looking for something and you just don't have, you just don't have it. And so yeah, you come to a real understanding of, you know, I don't know, your possessions, your belongings, what you need, what it feels like to not have the things that you need, like at all, you know. Like imagine going away, like when you go away on vacation and you don't pack enough, let's say, or you go overnight to somebody, we're gonna go stay
Yeah.
somewhere, and you're like, oh, I forgot my toothbrush or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like that with everything, and then like every single item, that you come across, like, oh, I need this thing, you have to, like, you go, it would trigger grief again,
Yeah.
every single time, you know. So it's, yeah, it's been a wild, it's been a wild journey for sure.
So what is the one thing that like you took away from that? How did it change you?
Um, I mean that I have what's important, you know. Eric and I and our cat made it out safe, and really, just that, that family matters and friends matter. What's really truly important in life.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and yeah, just being able to let go. And I've actually recognized now, because there is a lot of anxiety. It's, a huge horrible drought year. This year is the worst drought year that's been in the area. Luckily, it's been much cooler. It won't. I think more towards the, August and September is when it may start to heat up. But it's been incredibly dry, and we're back. We're back up. We're living in the same community again because I love it here. And despite the fact that I'm living, among some charred forest, there still was a lot that survived. And so, yeah, seeing how nature's regrowing is really beautiful. Uh, you know, Kind of mourning the loss of special places in nature that I really felt connected to. Like there were some really big redwoods that were quite close that I would visit every day, on a walk through the woods that, they did not fare very well, you know, and are kind of like the charred structures of what they had been. And that,
Hmm.
it's painful, it's painful to see, but then also really beautiful to see, how the nature's regrowing, and, the resiliency of nature. And so that's, it's helpful for me to be here and see how nature's resilient and regrowing. And, it's very metaphorical as well. I'm like, oh, and I also am, you know, coming back in a good way, and, overcoming the kind of the stress of it all. And so having lost everything, I find that I've already lost everything. I know what that is. I know what it is to lose every single thing.
Right.
And except for, thankfully, a loved one. Well, in this kind of tragic situation, because I also had just come out of 2 years previous, or 2 to 3 years previous, a lot of people passing away in my life too. So I feel like this was kind of, this was very, very difficult. And I'm so grateful that, no life, only one person lost their life in these fires, luckily. I mean, sadly, one elderly gentleman. But overall, in the whole area, nobody, nobody lost their life. A lot of animals, I think, did. But um, so yeah, so it's since I now have had the experience of having lost every single thing, I do feel a lot more, like I can let go of whatever stuff and things. Stuff and things are not really what's all that important, you know?
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm relieved that you and Eric and your cat are are doing well and and thriving. So what's next?
Um, what's next is, yeah, so that's part of my, it's coming back to being able to, bring forward a little more of my creative work. I'm working on an animated film project um, that we're trying to finish within the next year. Hopefully, the beginning of or middle of next year, we're going to finish, and going to try to move forward with that and get this little animated film out there. And yeah, and just kind of, yeah, bringing my gifts to the world in the ways that I can, um, creatively, and also just as a human being in this tricky world, you know, um, through meaningful kind of conversation and connection with people, and you know,
Well, speaking of meaningful conversations, this has been really lovely, and I'm deeply honored that you allowed me to spend time and hear what is alive within you. I deeply appreciate it. And how can people find you if they want to uh, work, or if they yeah, how do we find you?
okay, great. Well, as so we've just launched we've got our Instagram going that we've just launched, which is at Emerging Beyond.
Okay.
And then also my website is emergingbeyond.com.
Okay.
And yeah, and I'm around on social. People can find me.
Well, thank you so much. It's been lovely, and everybody, please check out Athena Gam on emergingbeyond.com. Is that correct?
Correct.
Awesome. And I will include those links in the show description. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. And once again, if you enjoy the podcast, please like, rate, subscribe. And thank you once again, Athena. Deeply grateful that you've been here. Now we are going to have our awkward ending. Are you ready?
I'm so ready. I love awkwardness.
Let's see how awkward it can get. Let's go. All right.